Hi, I'm Miss Becky from the Orland Park Public Library, and I am here to talk to you about the 20 new selections for the Caudill Book Award, and these are the books for 2022. I will be talking to you about these in alphabetical order of the author's last name. So, there are 20, so I'm going to get going right away. Our first book is The Line Tender by Kate Allen. This book is a realistic fiction book, and it features our main character Lucy and her BFF Fred. Lucy's mother, who was a marine biologist, has passed away, and she lives with her father, who's a little distant, and so Fred is a big part of her life. He lives right across the street from her. They decide to do an extra credit project for school where Lucy does all the artwork and Fred is working on all the facts of the different sharks that live in the area. They live near the ocean. And if you choose to read this book, there's some amazing illustrations here. I just marked a couple of them for you. So I think our author is also a very good artist as well. So that is The Line Tender by Kate Allen. Next we have Orange for the Sunsets. This is a historical fiction book, and this also features two best friends. We have Asha, who is from India originally but lives in Uganda, and Yusufu, who is African. And the two of them have lived, again, very close by for years. They're very good friends. But what happens, this takes place back in 1972, and the dictator Idi Amin comes to power, and he makes the decision that all Indians need to exit Africa, even though these people have lived there all their lives and many of them are legal citizens. This is a fiction book, but it is based on truth. The author is Indian, and she was born in Uganda and left. So if you're interested in historical fiction, this might be a good choice for you. Orange for the Sunsets. The next book I have is Be Prepared. This is a graphic novel. You're probably familiar with them, but it's has a lot of pictures along with the dialogue. This book is similar to the last book that I just talked to you about in that it is fiction based on truth. Our main character is Vera, and as you'll notice, our author's name is also Vera. She was born in Russia and moved to the United States when she was 5. And this story is about our character has a similar situation, and she not only is new to the U.S., but she is going off to summer camp for the first time. So if you've ever gone to summer camp, you know there can be some apprehension there, and that is what Vera has. And some not very nice things happen to her in summer camp. So if this is a genre that you're interested in, or if you like graphic novels, Be Prepared would be a good next read for you. Next up, I have King and the Dragonflies by Kaysen Callender. This is also a realistic fiction book. Our main character is King, and his brother Khalid has recently died. And the title comes from the fact that King feels his brother's presence in the dragonflies. And there's just a lot going on in his life. He's obviously really missing his older brother. He thinks that there's a girl that might like him. He's also pretty sure that he's gay, so that complicates the girl liking him. And then his best friend goes missing because his dad is physically abusive. So King is dealing with all of these things in this book, King and the Dragonflies. The next book is I Can Make This Promise. And this is also realistic fiction. There's a little theme emerging here, not only with realistic fiction, but this book is also somewhat based on truth. So our main character is Edie, and she is half Native American on her mom's side, but her mom was adopted by a white family. And this has been her life, and then one day she finds a box in the attic. Don't you just love stories where they find things in the attic? And she finds a picture of a woman who looks very much like she does, and the picture is signed Love Edith, and her name is Edith. Edie is her nickname, and she thinks, how come I don't know anything about this woman? How come nobody's talked about her? There's gotta be a connection. She looks like me and we have the same name. So this is the story of how she finds out the mystery behind that picture. And the author is also the daughter of a Native American who was adopted. So I Can Make This Promise by Christine Day. Next up, we have a young adult book. You can see it's listed on this spine label that we put. So that just tells you that it's a little bit of a higher reading level, and the subject matter might be a little bit more mature as well. So Maybe He Just Likes You by Barbara D. Also realistic fiction. Mila is a 7th grader. She's our main character, and she is receiving unwanted hugs from some of her male classmates. And that's where this title comes from. She talks to some of her friends about it, and they kind of shrug it off and say, well, maybe he just likes you, or you're being too particular or uptight, or taking it too personally. But an unwanted hug is an unwanted hug. And Mila needs to find her voice and realize that she needs to basically just say no. And this is her story of finding that voice. Maybe He Just Likes You by Barbara D. Next up, we have The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise, and this book is by Dan Gemeinhart. And my first impression when I saw this title was, does somebody really name their daughter Coyote? And you realize very early on in the book that that is a nickname that the main character is going by, and her father is going by the nickname Rodeo. So the whole book is about Coyote and Rodeo. And you find out that's because they're on the road, literally in an old school bus that you can see on the cover here, basically running away from a tragic accident that killed Coyote's sisters and her mother. And they pick up all kinds of interesting characters along the way. If you like characters and characterization, this would be a good book choice for you. They pick up Lester and Salvador and Val and Gabby, and they all have their own interesting and unique stories. So Coyote finds out that a park back home is being demolished, and she and her mom and her sisters buried kind of like a time capsule there. And so she needs to get back to get that time capsule before it's destroyed. But she knows her dad won't go along with that. And so she has to kind of surreptitiously or sneakily work it out that they make their way back home. So it's fiction, it's mystery, it's got a little bit of everything in it. And that is The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise. My next book is called Torpedoed. This is a nonfiction book. The subtitle is The True Story of the World War II Sinking of the children's ship called Benares. So wars are never pleasant things, but the devastating thing really about this act of war was this ship held 100 children that were being sent to Canada from England. And these were people trying to save their children from the devastation of war and the bombings. And then they were torpedoed. There's a lot of pictures. This is a packing list of what they wanted the children to pack. These are a couple of girls sitting by a bombed out plane in the background. This is a whole double front of pictures of what the ship looked like. And then there's also some drawings. This is a drawing of some of the people in the lifeboat waiting to be saved. So not too many nonfiction books on the list this year, and this is one of them. Some of the survivors are still alive, and our author was able to interview them. And the one woman, she just said when anything happened to her in her life, not a pleasant thing, she would tell herself, I was torpedoed, I'm resilient. So that is Torpedoed. True story of the sinking of a ship in World War II. Next book is From the Desk of Zoe Washington by Janae Marks. This is also a realistic fiction book. Zoe is our main character. She lives with her mother and her stepfather, and on her 12th birthday, she gets a letter from her dad, her biological father, who she knows nothing about. Turns out he's in prison. And she wants to obviously get to know him and find out his story, but kind of like the last book, she knows her mom's not going to be too happy about that. So she's got to keep it on the down low, keep it a secret. And it's hard for her to do that, so she enlists the help of her grandmother. And her grandmother encourages her to find out her father's story. And of course, there's other things happening in her life too. She's having some troubles with her best friend. So very much a realistic book in that these are some of the things that you might possibly be going through too. Finding out about family members that you didn't know about, and troubles with friends. That's something that pops up a lot in anyone's lives. So From the Desk of Zoe Washington. My next book is It's Trevor Noah, Born a Crime, Stories from a South African Childhood. This is a biography or a memoir by Trevor Noah. Some of you may have heard of him. He's the new host of The Daily Show. He's got all kinds of achievements under his belt. He's a comedian, a TV host, a producer, a writer, a political commentary, an author, and this is a very intense book. The title, Born a Crime, comes from the fact that he was born in South Africa to an African mother and a white European father. And that is literally against the law in South Africa. So that's why he subtitled this Born a Crime. There's an adult book called Born a Crime. This is the young reader's edition of the book. Very, very interesting story, but as I mentioned, it's very intense. He had a lot of physical abuse in his life and a lot of trials to overcome, but as you know, he persevered and has a fairly lucrative life right now. So it's Trevor Noah, Born a Crime. We are halfway through our list of 20. Those are the first 10. We will now start on the last 10. Next book is Free Lunch by Rex Ogle. This is also a memoir. And Rex Ogle also overcame a lot of issues, problems in his childhood. He was raised by his mother and his stepfather, and both of his parents were physically abusive, and it was also very hard for them to keep jobs, so they lived in poverty, and that's where the title of this book comes from, Free Lunch. This particular story, it's not a real long book, tells the story of Rex's 6th grade year in school, and he's on the free lunch program, and he's embarrassed by it. He doesn't want to be made fun of for that, but he's also hungry. And it talks about all of the issues. He's in 6th grade, so that's 11 or 12 years old. He has a 2.5-year-old brother who he's often put in charge of all day. So not only does he have to worry about where his next meal is coming from, or how to escape physical harm at the hands of his parents, but he's got to protect his younger brother from this, all at the same time trying to get homework done and get to school and learn. So another fairly intense book. The author said that he wrote this book because he said no one should feel ashamed, alone, or worthless. So he wanted to write this book to offer people hope. So that is Free Lunch by Rex Ogle. My next book is Inkling by Kenneth Apple. This is a fantasy. Our main character is Ethan, and Ethan's father is a fairly famous illustrator. He's very, very good. So people by association think that Ethan is also very, very good. Well, he's not as good as his dad. He's actually kind of mediocre. And so when he's working with a couple of classmates on a class project and he gets assigned the art part of it, he is procrastinating. He's procrastinating big time. And then you'll never believe what happened, but an ink blot literally jumps off the page of one of his dad's pieces of art that he's working on, and it comes alive. It's an ink blot that can not only draw, but it can also talk, and it can read. So once Ethan makes the acquaintance of Inkling, he thinks, whoa, all my problems are solved, because Inkling can do all the work on the project for him, and Ethan can take credit for it. Perfect scenario, right? If something's too good to be true, it's usually there's a problem with it, right? So of course there's the family dog that causes issues. There's a jealous classmate that's starting to kind of figure out what's going on here. So fun, adventurous fantasy, Inkling. Next book is Ghost Boys by Jewel Parker Rhodes. This has some qualities of realistic fiction and fantasy. The main character, who's actually dead, is 12-year-old Jerome. He is an African-American boy who has been killed by a white police officer shot in the back. But he is now a ghost boy, as you can tell from the title. Interestingly enough, the police officer who shot him has a daughter, Sarah, the same age as Jerome, and Sarah is able to see and hear Jerome. So they start talking about each of their sides of the story, and they get to be friends, and then other ghost boys appear. So there's a lot of that's where the historical fiction comes in, because you hear about other boys who have been murdered. The book is not too hard to figure out what's happening, because there are subtitles: alive, or chapter headings, I should say, and dead. So it's an easy book to figure out who's talking, and it's a book that also has some heavy material to it. Ghost Boys. Staying with the ghost theme, our next book is City of Ghosts. This is also a fantasy, and it's also a young adult book. You can tell by the spine label there. Our main character in this book is Cassidy. Now, Cassidy has the unique ability that they call lifting the veil. And what that means is she can go back and forth between the two worlds of the living and the dead. And her best friend is actually from the land of the dead. And his name is Jacob, and they have everything's worked out fairly well in their relationship until Cassidy's parents, who are researchers of ghosts, they are invited to Edinburgh, Scotland, to investigate different ghost stories. And so Cassidy goes with, and Jacob can pretty much go anywhere. And then they start realizing the dangers of slipping back and forth between these two different worlds. So if you like fantasy and a good ghost story, you might like City of Ghosts. Excuse me for 1 minute while I get a little drink here. Okay, our next book is To Night Owl from Dogfish. This is also realistic fiction. It's by Holly Goldberg Sloan and Meg Wolitzer. It's very hard to pick a favorite, but sometimes I know when I would book talk in person, one of the questions would be like, which book was your favorite? So if I had to pick a favorite, I would pick this one. This was a super fun book. It made me laugh out loud. One of the interesting things about this book is it's totally told, and I don't know if you can totally tell from here, it's totally told through emails and letters. So it's not a brand new concept, but it's a really fun one. I think it really works in this book. So in this book, we have two girls, Bet and Avery, and their fathers have fallen in love. And they want to go on a motorcycle trip to China, and they want to send their two daughters off to camp, and of course they want them to be best friends. And when Bet and Avery figure this out, they're like, oh no. They don't want their lives to change. They don't want a sister. They are not interested in this. So they start communicating via email, and they say, not only are we not going to be best friends, we're not going to be friends at all. They are totally working towards not being friends. And they think that it's going to be very easy because Bet is fearless and outgoing, and she loves the ocean. Avery is very intense, kind of nerdy personality, and she has a lot of fears, and a big fear of hers is the water and the ocean. So they think, no problem, we have nothing in common, we will not be friends. Well, you can probably already predict maybe one thing that's going to happen. There's lots of twists and turns in this book. There's lots of different love relationships in this book, and it's a fun read, lots of adventure, and a laugh out loud funny. So that is To Night Owl from Dogfish, and the title comes from, those are the nicknames that the girls give each other. Next book is another graphic novel. This is called The OK Witch. Give you an idea of what some of the illustrations look like there. And our main character in this book is Moth. And Moth is 13 years old. 13 years old, so that's 7th, 8th grade, right? And she finds out she's a witch. And not only is she a witch, but her mother is a witch. This is a huge thing for her to find out at age 13. And so she is just obviously having some conflicts with her mom. There's a little bit of a romantic level in the book. And of course there's magic in the book. There's an alternate world where witches don't age. And so it's answering a lot of questions for Moth, and it's mostly bringing up a lot of new questions. So if you like the graphic novel format, you like fantasy, this might be a book for you to choose, The OK Witch. Next book is Clean Getaway, also realistic fiction, featuring our main character, William Scoob Lamar. And so his nickname is Scoob because when he was a small boy, he liked Scooby-Doo, but he couldn't pronounce it. And so he got the nickname Scoob. So Scoob is currently in trouble, shall we say, with his father. And he has been told to stay home. And Scoob is doing that until his grandmother calls him and says, "Hey, Scoob, you want to go on a trip with me?" And Scoob's thinking, "Hey, this is my ticket out of being stuck at home." And he's not really breaking the rules, is he? Because it's a grown-up and it's his grandmother who's asking him to go. So he conveniently doesn't tell his father and takes off with his grandmother. But as he's on the road with his grandmother, he's finding out a few things, such as she sold her house and used the proceeds to buy a big Winnebago trailer, and that is what they're traveling in. And her behavior is a little odd. She's switching out license plates. She's talking in her sleep. She's telling him different stories that he'd never heard before. So there's a lot of mystery to this. There's a lot of adventure. And it's a great relationship between Scoob and his grandmother. That's called Clean Getaway. Next up is another graphic novel, and it's also another young adult book. This book is called They Called Us Enemy, and it is by George Takei. Now, some of you, if you're Star Trek fans, might recognize that name. George Takei played Mr. Sulu in the original Star Trek episodes. This story, though, is his story of when his family, who are of Japanese descent, were sent to a concentration camp in 1942. And he was young when this happened, but as you can imagine, it had a traumatic effect on him and his family. So, graphic novel format again, but tells the story of a very sad part of our U.S. history. That is, They Called Us Enemy. Next book is Other Words for Home. And this book is by Jasmine Warga. You can probably see this medal here. And if you can't read it, it is a Newbery Honor book. So the Newbery winner every year is the book that is deemed by the committee to be the best book written for children during that year. And then they also have some honor books, and this was one of the honor books. This is the story of Judah. She is from Syria, and she and her mother leave Syria because there is a lot of violence going on. And her uncle, her mother's brother, lives in the U.S., and they are going to come and live with them. And they have a daughter the same age as Judah, and so, of course, everyone thinks they're going to be best friends, just like the dads think that Bet and Avery are going to be best friends in the other book I talked about. Well, of course, that doesn't happen. Judah just wants to fit in, but she comes from a very different culture. She's not used to the U.S. and all of the different things that are considered normal here, and she overhears her cousin calling her weird which is very hurtful to her because she's just trying to fit in and be a citizen. She's got a lot of issues going on, not only just trying to fit in with school and making friends and living with her uncle and aunt and cousin, but her father and her brother have stayed behind in Syria, so she's very concerned about them because she's very worried about her brother getting hurt with some of the violence. So this is called Other Words for Home. I can't believe it, but we're already to our very last book, and that is Genesis Begins Again. And this book is by Alicia Williams. This is another realistic fiction book. Our main character is 13-year-old Genesis, and she's got her troubles too. And the main problem here is that her family, it keeps moving because her father has a couple of addictions, gambling and alcohol being two of them, and it's very hard for them to stay rooted in one place and for her dad to keep one job. So similar to the last book, she wants to make friends, she wants to fit in, and it's just her experience of trying to make all of that happen. So that is Genesis Begins Again. That is our very last book of the 20 books. I hope there was at least one or several that you are personally interested in reading. And again, hope to see you in the library. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.